Alright, so in the last video we learned about the quantity theory of money, and in this video I want to talk about another theory of money that kind of builds on the quantity theory of money. And the first thing that I want to say is that all of these different theories that we're learning are different schools of thought, are different ideas that professors have had about how money affects the real economy, how money affects our macroeconomy. And the first thing that I want to say in this video is that they aren't completely sure yet of how money affects the real economy. That it's still a topic that is a really important topic, one that people are still working on all the time, and that we don't have a complete and totally right answer yet. That they're still trying to understand it. So I was never really told that as I went through my economics courses, and it makes a big difference because you hear all these different theories and you look at them and are like, well, this theory tells me one thing and this other theory tells me another one, and which one's really true? And the answer is that we're not really sure yet. So we kind of teach you a bunch of them and then we let you use all of them to make the best decisions that you can because no one is really completely 100% sure yet. That being said, we are very sure about a couple things. So we'll get to those couple things in a little bit, but first I want to talk about monetarism. So monetarists, economists that fall into the monetarist school of thought, believe that the quantity theory of money holds in the long run. So in the long run, if you increase the money supply, all you do is increase prices. So in the long run, an increase in the money supply leads to an increase in prices, and that's it. But they believe that in the short run, that changes in the money supply have real impacts on national output in the short run. So in the short run, and again, these are vague terms, but the long run I normally think of as decades, and the short run I think of as years. And this is different terminology than you'll hear in like finance classes. In finance classes, the short run is can be a matter of minutes sometimes, and the long run is normally like a year. So in economics, when we say long run, we think decades, and the short run we think not short run. I don't need to rewrite short. Short run we normally think years. Okay, so in the short run, an increase in the money supply can lead to an increase in Y, in real GDP. And so this next little bullet that I put down here is just what I said at the very start, is that almost everyone agrees, and I should really say almost, but I've never met anyone that doesn't believe this, is that almost everyone agrees that the quantity theory of money works in the long run. So over decades, when you increase the money supply, what you're really doing is increasing the price level. You're creating inflation. But in the short run, we're still kind of unsure. So the monetarism is kind of the leading school of thought right now on the short run. And you'll see this when you hear about, politics and what people think the Federal Reserve should be doing, and when you hear about stock prices and all kinds of things in finance. So you hear a lot about monetarism. Okay, so how does the next thing that we're going to answer in this video is how does this happen? How does, in the short run, how do changes in the money supply have real impacts on the national output? So how? And the way that we talk about this is that, and that's a how, not a now, the way that we talk about this is with the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model, the same one that you should remember from a little while back. And so here's the logic, is that an increase in the money supply means that you have more money in your bank account. Literally, the number in your bank account gets bigger. And that means that you think that you have more wealth. So an increase in the money supply leads you to go spend more because you think that you're wealthier. You have a bigger number in your bank account. So that leads to an increase in aggregate demand because you go spend more because you think that you're wealthier. And an increase in aggregate demand, if we are not at full employment GDP, So if we're on this line right here, and I'll label this aggregate demand 1, an increase in aggregate demand can have a real impact on real GDP. Or I should say can have an impact on real GDP, can have a real impact. So if aggregate demand goes from aggregate demand 1 to aggregate demand 2, then real GDP increased. So this would be Y1 and this would be Y2. Alright, so I want to say that again. If the money supply increases, let's just say that you have $100 in your bank account and now all of a sudden you have $200. Even though really what happened is that all of the banks in the entire US just decided to double the number that was in your bank account. So you think that you have more money, even though what really happened is just the number in every single person's bank account doubled. So you don't really have any more wealth, but the number is bigger. So you think that you're wealthier. And that leads you to go out and spend more because you say, oh, well, I have an extra $100 and I'm going to go spend it on something because I don't need this to sit in my bank account to save. So because you go and spend it, and everyone does this, not just you, but this happens to every single person in the US, that leads to an increase in aggregate demand across the entire nation. Every single person is going and spending more. And because every single person is going and spending more, people will go and produce more to meet that demand, and that will lead to an increase in real GDP. Now the opposite is true also. So if every single bank decided to cut the number in your bank account in half, you would say, oh shoot, I need to save more. I thought I had $100 in my bank account and now I only have $50 and I need, I need $100 to pay rent next month. So a decrease in the money supply will also lead to a decrease in aggregate demand. Because what will happen there is you'll say, oh shoot, I have $50, so I need to save money to be able to pay rent next month. And because you're saving money and not spending it, that will lead to, so I'll do this one, this will all be in green. This guy will be in green. So that would lead to a decrease in aggregate demand. And as long as we're not on this part of the aggregate supply curve, as long as we're not at full employment GDP, that can lead to a decrease in real GDP from Y2 to Y1. So in the next couple of videos, we're going to talk about all the different ways that the money supply can shift. And to do that, we're going to start talking about the Federal Reserve. But in this video, I wanted you to get comfortable with how shifts in the money supply can affect how a theory, the monetarist theory, talks about and deals with changes in the money supply leading to real changes in aggregate demand, which lead to changes in real GDP. So this is just another way to think about what happens in the short run when we change the money supply, that it doesn't just affect prices, but it also affects real output. And so we'll get to working with this and we'll kind of talk about what can actually shift the money supply and how do we do that.